Okay, so good morning to those of you in the States. Good evening to those of you in Israel. I'm using today. I don't have that many things, that I have taught before that I haven't shared with you this year, and it's getting harder and harder. But by pure coincidence, I found the Midrash that my sister wrote about Jonah, which I've taught a few times, which I'd like to record today. And it's also my niece who's here from California, from New York, who came in for my son's installation, just stopped, sitting, saying Kaddish just the other day. So I told her last night when she came in that I was teaching this. So that was really cool. So, okay, so let me just share the screen
Hmm.
with you. Here we go.
There you go.
Okay, I assume you see it.
Mm, yep, now we do.
Okay, so this is a whale, as you could see, and my part of my sister's midrash was really had to do with whales, that she saw, and she associated really with with. Okay, so this is my sister who died a year ago. Whoops, 1 minute. And I guess I should change it here to to time. But she was a psychiatric social worker, and she also was very interested in, just like I, in Midrash. And you could see this is my beautiful talit that she made. She made lovely, lovely talitot. And it's actually on the cover of my book, 40 Years of Being a Feminist Jew in Israel. And what she told me and wrote is that before this midrash, she had never written a story before and has never written one since. And so it just came pouring out, and it never needed editing. All right. Um,
Wow.
so, and when it was published, somebody thought it was too depressing. But so, she changed the last line, but then in the end, she referred it to the depressed feeling. So, I mean, a lot of you probably read the book of Jonah during during the mincha service on Yom Kippur. A lot of people don't go to the synagogue then, and it's a shame because you miss the reading, and it's such a beautiful book with such an amazing story. Um, and so that you see here, she put in all of her names. The Lafayette here is because my father, very briefly, when he was in Paris in 1920 or something like that, fell in love with Paris, and he briefly changed his name to Lafayette. But unfortunately, by the time she was born, that he no longer had that name. But she always regretted, because her name Menorah is unusual, and she would have loved to have been called Menorah Lafayette. That was her fantasy. So for this, she put her name in that way. And this appears, it's totally out of print. You cannot find it. A lovely collection of stories. I have a copy of it, and I sometimes use it. Reading between the lines, news stories. Notice, it doesn't say Midrashim, news stories from the Bible. Okay, so this is, I think I actually have the whole Midrash in here. Let me just check 1 minute, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll need a few readers. Yeah, we'll need a few readers. So let's see who's here now. We have Louise, we have Susan, we have Bonnie, we have Francine, Barbara, Geraldine, Toby, and Stevie. Stevie, are you there or just your picture?
I'm here, but would you mind me not reading?
You don't want to read. Okay. So we'll have the first reader. I'm going to go in reverse order. The first reader will be Toby, the way I see you here. The second reader will be Geraldine. Wait, you moved around here. The third reader will be Bonnie. The fourth reader will be Barbara. The fifth reader will be Francine. The sixth reader will be Susan. And the seventh reader will be Louise. Okay, you jumped around. Did I miss anyone? I got all of you, except for Janice, who doesn't read, and Stevie, who doesn't. Okay, so wait, do I have to make it bigger?
Bigger would be good if you could.
I
Teeny
can.
bit would be nice, yeah.
Okay, and I must add one thing before you begin reading. I only feel it's fair to my sister. She was very angry with me that I inserted the pictures. She felt it was distracting from her, from her. But I told her that that's my style and it's my class. So, but I just, should let you know that. Okay, so let me just make sure that I have it here. Okay, so we can begin.
This is a story about Jonah ben Amittai, Jonah, the son of Amittai, a believer in God and God's truth, Emet. Jonah had also been a true believer in the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and land. And he had worshiped God until his 13th summer, the summer of the coming of the great fish, Dag Gadol. The events of that summer were to leave him with his soul seared and his belief shattered. Jonah was the youngest of his many brothers and sisters. As often happens in large and bustling families, the youngest, Jonah, was the family favorite. He was a sunny, equable, and engaging child. Left to his own devices a great deal of the time, he roamed the countryside and grew up a lover of plants and of animals. As he grew older, he began spending more and more time with those of his brothers who were shepherding his father's flocks. Amittai, Jonah's father, felt this was a good choice for him. Jonah would make a good shepherd. He was caring about the animals entrusted to him and sensitive and imaginative enough to deal with the solitary life imposed on the shepherd. So Jonah began his apprenticeship and preparation for his adult life.
Then one day, an extraordinary thing happened. A merchant happened by. That in itself was not extraordinary, but this was a special traveler, for he was a seafaring merchant, and such men did not often pass through the hilly countryside of Gat Hefer, where Jonah lived. As the traveler told his tales, Jonah's eyes sparkled and his cheeks flushed. Jonah could already imagine himself astride a great sea beast, urging it on to greater speeds, diving down to the depths, and then just as he could no longer hold his breath, hurtling up to the surface again. Such were Jonah's fantasies, even as he listened to the traveler's more mundane stories. Jonah's intense listening and yearning looks were not lost on the merchant, for he had young children of his own. He recognized Jonah to be a very special child, and so he did an extraordinary thing. One night he said to Amittai, "I would like to take Jonah back home with me to Joppa for the summer. I've seen the wonder in his eyes and know that when even more wondrous imaginings are stirring within him, I will take him and return him safely." Jonah held his breath to await his father's decision. Amittai looked at Jonah. What is that? Oh, wait, this is in the way. Hold on. His favorite beloved child. Then Amittai looked at his wife, Emet. Should they let their youngest and dearest son go with this man? Who was the seafarer? Why had he come into their life? And who was Jonah? For it was not only the sea merchant who had recognized the specialness of Jonah, his parents had known it for a long time as well, but it had never been told to them that their son was to be a prophet. And then amidst all these questionings, or perhaps despite them, the decision was made. Perhaps the decision had been made from old. Jonah will go down to Joppa.
I can't see the top. Okay. Jonah and the merchant arose early in the morning and went down to Joppa, down to the sea that Jonah had never seen. The sea and the surf and the reefs were all beyond anything he had imagined. Just as he had gotten to know the animals and plants of his countryside, he plunged in the sea, became home to him. There were no great beasts to ride astride, but there were deep dives down to the seafloor, where he would gaze at the beauteous and stunning sea animals. The exotic iridescent colors and flashing sparkle of their luminous skins were beyond description. Truly, God's handiwork was incredible and wonderful to behold. All through the summer, Jonah swam and dived with the sea creatures. He wove garlands of weeds and twined them about his head, dived down deep to the base of the reefs, and imagined what it would be like to be a seahorse. That summer, Jonah was the most joyful and thankful he had ever been in his 13 years.
And then one hot, sultry day, with the east wind blowing so strong as to be almost suffocating, the awful thing happened. It began early in the morning. Jonah was awakened by sounds of shouting and general bedlam. He jumped out of bed, tugged on his clothes, and followed the shouting down to the seashore. There on the beach was a sight Jonah was never to forget as long as he lived. Stretched across the shore was a white, unbelievably huge sea beast. People were exclaiming that it must be a leviathan or a behemoth or some incredible beast of old. In the end, they simply called it Dag Gadol, huge fish, or Hadaga, the female fish. What to call it, however, was less a problem than what to do about it. It was clear that the Daga was already beginning to suffer.
Slowly, some chain of command was formed, with Jonah's sea merchant designated as the head. A plan was developed to get the Daga back into the sea. It was no easy task, nor did they think it would be. As graceful and as self-sufficient as the Daga was in the sea, she was equally cumbersome and dependent on land. In the sea, despite its weight of 150 short tons, it could frolic and cavort with ease, but on the shore, it could barely move. Instead, it lay prostrate and heaving its enormous bulk. Hundreds of townsmen were deployed to relay with buckets of water to wet the length of the great fish, 95 feet long.
Meanwhile, a raft of sorts was being built, onto which the daga was to be moved and then hauled back into the sea. Some of the children tried to get the great fish to drink and eat. Jonah was the one to try most often. He would stroke the daga, wipe its incredibly enormous brow with the wet sponge he kept near him, and urge her to take some nourishment. He would croon and sing to her as he had with his father's sickly sheep. At times, he thought the great fish looked at him thankfully with its big, soft eyes, and Jonah's insides quivered. After what seemed an eternity, the raft was ready, and the men were gathered to transfer the great fish onto it. After another eternity and another day, the great fish had been transferred, and hundreds of boats were ready to pull her out to the depths of the sea. And when it was time, by now the third day, the ropes were cut, and the daga could again swim in the sea. Jonah went down with her as far as he could and whispered farewell. He wanted this fairest and most marvelous of creatures to know how much he loved her and that he would remember her always.
This time, when the boats returned to the shore, there was thanksgiving, but no feasting. The townspeople were weary, and there was trepidation in the air. As before, everyone returned to their well-deserved rest, but Jonah slept fitfully. Nor was he surprised to hear the merchant enter his room, crying out as he roused him, "A great misfortune has befallen us. The Dagah has returned a third time. Come, Jonah, let us call upon God. Perhaps God will be kind to us, and she will not perish." Jonah understood from this that there would be no rescue attempted again. So Jonah went down to the seashore to find his beloved great white fish. Tears welled from his eyes, his throat was choked, and his insides were constricting. Jonah was furious and uncomprehending. How could the Dagah persist in her wayward course? For as the prophet Jeremiah said, even the stork in the sky knows her seasons, and the turtle dove, swift and crane keep the time of their coming. Twice she had beached herself, and twice she had been rescued. Jonah could not fathom this aberrant behavior. He could understand that humankind might remove itself out from the law, but God's other creatures were not endowed with perversity. Therefore, for God's other creatures, God's law had to work perfectly. And if there came a time when that law seemed deficient, or that his creatures acted deficiently, Jonah expected God's intercession to right the aberration.
Have we finished with people?
Yeah.
So okay,
Yeah.
so
You wanna
go back
start
to
over?
go back to number 1. Yeah. Who was number 1?
I am.
think-
I am.
Yeah.
So Jonah prayed to God. I know that you're a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, renouncing punishment. But when God's intercession was not forthcoming, Jonah gave the Dagah what comfort he could while he waited for her death. And when she died, Jonah cried out, "Please, Lord, take my life, for I would rather die than live." The Lord replied, "Are you that deeply grieved?" Jonah was deeply grieved, and he continued to mourn the death of his great fish and the ways of God with his creatures for the rest of his life. His friend, the sea merchant, brought him home to his family safely, as he had promised Jonah's father. On the surface, he seemed changed, but not so disturbingly that he stood apart from his adolescent peers, who were also undergoing many changes. But Jonah was haunted by visions he could not share. He could not communicate the devastating effect of his encounter with the Dagah, and he became estranged from those close to him. He remained a caring shepherd, but gaiety had gone out from him forever, for gaiety comes from knowing that God is good. What happened to his Dagah was a subversion of God's goodness. Jonah was but in his 13th year, and he had no way of encompassing his horror. Jonah continued to shepherd for his father and remained in his father's home.
So time passed. Jonah became the master shepherd. He was adored by his young apprentices because he cared not only for the sheep, but for them as well. Yet neither they nor anyone else could get to know him well. More and more, he became a solitary man, sunk in profound and disturbing thoughts. From time to time, Jonah wondered idly about the future. While he did not actively seek death, he did not think he would avoid it if it came his way. With the passage of time, healing had not taken place, and life seemed increasingly empty and futile. And then one day, into this empty landscape of his life, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. God wants to, what is that?
Nineveh.
Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim judgment upon it, for their wickedness has come before me. Jonah's reaction was immediate. He started out to flee from the Lord's service. Jonah called on God not to send him. He told him he was a shattered vessel and would not be able to hold his words. But God held firm. It was his intention to show Jonah that disaster was not always the way of the world. Indeed, God had not interceded for Jonah's great white fish, but now he would intercede for a whole city. in which there are more than 170,000 persons who do not yet know their right hand from their left, and many beasts as well. You ever know what does that say?
Uvehema Rabbah, that's the Hebrew.
Okay. Okay.
When the Ninevites returned from their evil ways, God would forgive them. God hoped that Jonah would then be able to be reconciled to his ways, forgive him, and allow healing to take place. God knew the burden was on him to help Jonah turn back to him. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva. Turn back, O Lord, to yourself, and he will return. And God knew that he needed to restore the illusion of goodness to Jonah. Kadesh Yameinu Kikedem. Renew our days as of old. God had all his props prepared. The fish had been readied and waiting in the wind since the time of creation. God held firm. And so Jonah began to pack for his journey. He did not have much to pack, save some goods and some money. He began his journey, a brooding man haunted by his visions. He walked steadily, looking neither to the right nor to the left. And for the second time in his life, Jonah went down to Joppa and found a sea vessel going to Tarshish. With the money he had packed, he paid the fare and went aboard with the others to Tarshish, away from the service of the Lord. But the Lord cast a mighty wind upon the sea, and the ship was in danger of breaking up. The captain went to find Jonah, who had gone down to the depths of the ship to find peace and sleep. The captain roused him, crying, "Up, call upon your God. Perhaps the God will be kind to us, and we will not perish."
Jonah, however, was indifferent. In another time and what seemed to be another age, he had uttered just such a prayer, and it had not been responded to. So the sailors cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. They said to him, "Tell us, you who have brought this misfortune upon us, what's your business? Where have you come from? What's your country? Of what people are you?" And Jonah replied, "I am a Hebrew." And he added, "I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made both sea and land." For Jonah had no difficulty in acknowledging God's sovereignty. His quarrel with God was not that he ruled, but that he had not interceded. And the sailors were terrified and asked Jonah what had he done. And when they learned he was fleeing from the Lord's service, they asked him, What must we do to you to make the sea calm around us?" And so now the question Jonah had often pondered while tending his father's sheep was his to answer. He had not sought death, but nor would he avoid it. Perhaps he could be rid of his loneliness, of the emptiness he carried within him, lo, these many dreary years. And so he did not hesitate long before he answered, Heave me overboard, for I know that this terrible storm came upon you on my account." And they heaved Jonah overboard, and the sea stopped raging.
Wait, somebody is
Is
there's some
somebody on
talking in the
cue?
background. Where is it coming from?
Anyone who's not
Francine-
reading should mute themselves.
I think it's Francine, yeah.
Okay, all right, go on. I'm sorry. Where were we?
Next reader, I think.
No, I don't think we finished it yet.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
Start, just,
I'll start here. Jonah had often, it's still happening.
Francine, you need to mute yourself. Thank you.
She is muted.
he is muted.
Now,
Okay, so, all right, so go back. Perhaps he could be rid of his loneliness.
Perhaps he could be rid of his loneliness, of the emptiness he carried within him, lo, these many years. And so he didn't hesitate long before he answered, "Heave me overboard, for I know that this terrible storm came upon you on my account." And they heaved Jonah overboard, and the sea stopped raging.
Okay, so we just look at some pictures before of the heaving overboard. Okay, here's Jonah. And here's the whale waiting for him. All right. And here is another illustration of him being swallowed. This is a medieval. Just to give us a sense of this. This is from, where are we? Okay. Okay, now, next reader, whoever is continuing.
Francine, I think.
No, there's, well, we can't, Francine, you'll have to mute yourself. We'll have to skip you. Francine, I'm muting you because there's, okay, I'm muting you. And who read after Francine?
I do.
Okay.
Okay. As he pitched into the water, Jonah thought he saw a brilliant, huge streak of white float by. Then suddenly there was only darkness and a dreamlike rocking sensation. And when his life was ebbing away, Jonah remembered the Lord, and God was aghast. This was not the return to Shuvah he had planned. God wanted Jonah to be restored to the reality, despite the pain of reality. And so the Lord commanded the fish, and it spewed Jonah out upon dry land. And the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go at once to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim to it what I tell you. Jonah no longer called out to God, nor did he try to flee his service. Finally, after sleepwalking through his adult life, he summoned his last bit of energy to flirt with death. He pitted himself against God unsuccessfully. Now, if God still wished to use a shattered vessel, he would protest no more. So Jonah went at once to Nineveh and proclaimed, 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Now, the people of Nineveh believed God. They were evil, yet they had belief. They believed that if everyone turned back from their evil ways, who knows but that God may turn, Yashuv, and relent. He may turn back from his wrath so that we do not perish.
Okay, so here we have Jonah preaching to the Ninevites. And here we have Jacob Steinhardt, right? It's amazing etching with the preaching.
Mm.
And now we could continue.
While Jonah was waiting to see what happened to the city, he left and found a place east of Nineveh. And God brought out the various props he had provisioned for this very occasion. The Lord provided a kikayon plant to provide shade for his head. But the next day at dawn, God provided a worm which attacked the plant so that it withered. And when the sun rose, God provided a sultry east wind. The sun beat down on Jonah's head, and he became faint. Now Jonah remembered the sultry, suffocatingly hot day. This is how it had been the day of the coming of the great fish. He became faint, and his memories became unbearable. He begged for death, saying, I would rather die than live. Then God said to Jonah, Are you so deeply grieved about the plant? Yes, he replied tonelessly, so deeply that I want to die. And Jonah knew that God knew it was not the plant that Jonah was referring to.
Okay. Here we have another picture that is from Steinhardt. You could see him suffering here. Here we have another woodcut. Jonah under, right, the kikayon. Enjoying it. You see, you could see his, and here we have another one. He was, you could see that he was obsessed with Jonah. And here's where it dries up, right? And now the sun is, and here's the last one. This is, all right, also. Okie doke. Continue. Who reads after?
Toby again would be number one.
We're back to one? Okay.
I guess so, okay.
Okay. But what could be done at this point? The Daga had died long ago, and God had not interceded. That could not be undone. Could Jonah not recognize, however, the enormity of what God was prepared to do now? He was prepared to renounce the punishment he had prepared to bring upon Nineveh, an enormously large city. Not since Sodom and Gomorrah was God prepared to show the vastness of his merciful qualities, based not on justice nor on Nineveh's proven evil track record, but on divine compassion and graciousness. But Nineveh promised it would turn from evil. God asked only for the intent, and he would extend deliverance. God did not know of any other way he could have an impact on Jonah. Even now, he hoped to impress him, crying out to Jonah with passion. And should I not care about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not yet know their right hand from their left, and many beasts as well?
Now Jonah smiled. He was amazed that he was truly happy about Nineveh's salvation. God's caring and compassion had reached him and warmed him. It reconciled him to life, a life that could be lived joyfully. But withal, Jonah recognized, however, that a basic fault line laid at the very core of his being. He knew he lacked redemptive belief, having learned too early in life that, in a blink of an eye, terrible and unimaginable things can happen and that can never be undone. So while God had spared Nineveh for Jonah and his great beasts, God's deliverance had come too late.
Okay, so let's just stop here for a minute. Let me stop the sharing. All right. So first of all, before we talk about, what my sister had to say about all of this, what are your thoughts about the Midrash? What's your feelings about it?
I think it gives Jonah this vulnerability, and he has so much faith in the beginning. He's, caring for the animals and believing in God, and it just, he becomes so disappointed and vulnerable at the, during the course of the story. And then hopefully at the end, he's getting his faith restored to some extent. That
Or
God
not.
keeps
I
at,
mean,
and God keeps at it,
Okay.
There was a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
It went, what is trauma? And where it, 3 times this fish came back when he was very young and vulnerable, and he never got over it. And then the story. There's a lot of feeling in this Midrash. There's a lot of bearing of soul, and that's what I it's a very feeling Midrash. There's a lot of
Okay, I'm glad that you feel that. Great. What else? Any other thoughts about this? But what makes this, by the way, great Midrash, which it is? What makes it actually Midrash? Remember that Midrash explains gaps in text, right? So in what way is this great Midrash?
Well, it gives you sort of like a background for Jonah and how he reacted under the gourd and when he was asked to go to Nineveh. So it sort of explains why he wanted to flee originally.
Okay, so what we have here is sort of a backstory,
Right.
right, for why he wanted to flee, because at the beginning it's not clear. God tells him go to Nineveh, and then he
He said
he
no.
runs away.
Right.
Okay, so it's not, it's not typical, okay. So my sister will explain why she wrote this. Let me just share the screen again. Okay, so what she wrote here, I'll read it. Whoops, authors. This actually appeared. Why? Do you still see that stuff on the top there? I don't know how to get rid of it. Okay.
Yeah.
No, we just see author's note.
Okay, so now I see it. Okay, so notice this picture here, which I think, by the way, is a fabulous picture.
Right. Jonah in the middle,
Yeah. Okay.
the
So she
belly of
wrote
the beast.
yeah. So she wrote, my ideas for this midrash came to me from conscious and subconscious thinking. Consciously, I was intrigued by Jonah's need to flee the burden of prophecy. I wondered what cataclysmic occurrence had shattered his ability to believe in the possibility of deliverance. So this was basically what some of you said before. Okay. The subconscious, now remember, my sister is was a psychiatric social worker. The subconscious shapers of this midrash are as follows: early intermittent separation. Now she's talking about herself. Early intermittent separations from my mother destroyed my trust in the basic goodness of the world. The death of our first and stillborn daughter, strangled by the very cord created to sustain her, became the model for the Daga cavorting in glee in her amniotic waters. The spectral image of the Holocaust is never far from my consciousness. Despite the emergence of the State of Israel, God's deliverance came too late for those who perished, for those who were sent to the left or right. Okay, that's a quotation from the
Right.
right, and then she has a quotation here. Okay, where am I? And I'll come back to what she said here afterwards. All right. Okay, so that's one thing. So we'll come back to that in a minute, but let's go back. Let me just give you a little background. So my mother had tuberculosis.
Oh,
And so she was sent away to um
A
what did you call it?
sanatorium.
Yeah, to sanatoriums, yeah.
Sanatorium,
Sanatoriums.
mountains.
And there were a lot of Jewish sanatoriums, by the way.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so she could really, couldn't, it's sort of a little bit like what happened during COVID. She really couldn't see my mother. And so my father basically occasionally would, take her, show her the mother, but she basically was shifted around to my aunt, and she didn't really have any stability, and she only got to know my mother after, she was cured, and she was about 2 years old, I think. So this is one thing. And then she was about 9 months pregnant with her uh, first daughter, and who they discovered was, dead dead, but she had to actually walk around for a while till, they wanted her to have a natural birth. In those days, I don't know. Today they wouldn't do that, but anyway,
Right.
so
Yeah,
this is
they do.
really, and she was also older when she got married. So I mean, this was really very traumatic, and she really wanted to have a daughter, and it took two sons, and finally my niece was born much later. But she really, so all of this was very traumatic, and and I don't know if any of you felt that, but the whole idea of the Holocaust and the unfairness of God, right? And the fact that, if
Right.
there is deliverance, that it was coming too late. So all of this was in the background. Do any of you have any thoughts, or did you feel any of that? You said that there was a lot of feeling in there. Did any of you have any thoughts about this?
I think that he clearly thought it was unfair after all of the work they did to save the big white Daga, that the fish died anyway, and that had a big effect on him. And I think you can make a parallel between that and, say, the Holocaust example of all of the efforts and then what had happened.
Okay, we could also bring it up to today, by the way.
Yes.
Today we talk so much about trauma, post-traumatic stress, and we talk about that, and there's so much, going on, and she's saying you never really get over it, and it influences you throughout your life. So I mean, she's basically saying something like that.
Right.
Okay, so now she goes a little bit more. So when she was taking a course to become a um, to become accredited, so you have to write these little papers. So this is what she wrote. Barbara, would you like to read this? It's fairly long.
Okay, I can read, and I appreciate you making it larger.
Yeah.
In reading Mourning and Melancholy, I was reminded of a story I had written, a midrashic fantasy on the biblical book of Jonah. When I wrote the story, I thought I was simply trying to understand some of the complexities and contradictions in this book. I thought it was a response to my having studied the book in a group study with friends. The story, however, just seemed to write itself, requiring almost neither conscious effort nor thought on my part, and when finished, requiring almost no editing. Additionally, I had never written, nor have I since written, a story. That alone should have told me that something deeper was at work. However, it was not until I decided to publish it that I took a second look at it and discovered to my utter astonishment that this story was not about Jonah, who was in the belly of a whale, but rather about my daughter, who was in my belly for 9 months and was delivered stillborn. When I was pregnant, my husband and I used to liken her to a fish and imagine her cavorting gleefully in her amniotic water. Thus, 13 years after her death, I was still actively, albeit unconsciously, engaged in the task of mourning. And this, despite the fact that consciously I had already grieved deep and long. It was to take me another 10 years to get what I belatedly realized was her story published. Speaking of the adhesiveness of libido, perhaps now transmuted to perseverance. And 27 years after her death, as I write this now, tears are streaming down my face. Freud's observation that man never willingly abandons a libido position, not even when a substitute is already beckoning to him, holds true in this instance as well. I have 3 wonderful children, but they never have been substitutes for what our daughter might have been. Nevertheless, there is some comfort to be taken here, because implicit in Freud's observation is the notion that objects are not interchangeable, no matter how seductively they beckon. I chose mourning and melancholia because of the issue of loss in my life. This was not the first one I had experienced, and because it is so germane to my practice. I had not thought about the larger concept of the adhesiveness of the libido as a profound underlay in mourning. Loss is so elemental, beginning perhaps with the loss of the uterine environment, that it is surprising we are so poorly equipped to deal with it. I am fascinated by this wish or need to hold on to whomever and whatever touches us deeply, and plan to explore it in greater depth in the next several years.
Ooh, isn't that amazing?
Very nice.
Yes.
Very nice.
Wow, that really is amazing. So maybe at the end I'll show you these video clips after we stop. After we stop.
Recording.
I'll just show. Yeah, I'll just show you. So here's a modern day version.
Wow.
Isn't that something
Suitcase
else?
in hand.
And I like to say that they say it's in Haifa and that there are Zim, what are those boxes called around?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This is, you see the
Yeah.
Zim
Containers.
boats?
Containers, yes.
Right. I don't know if any of you ever took a Zim boat to Israel. I did when
Oh, I wish I had.
in 1962, when I came to Israel for the first time, as a student. Yeah. So wait, that's the one we're looking at. And here's another one. Well, this is just a normal one, right? But look at that. Look at the right? And here's this is also really very, right? Man overboard, but the fish looks, so threatening here. So it really gives you a sense of, and then I think it was Norman last time. He's on a plane right now, who suggested that we read this.
Yeah.
Right? I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea in the sky. And all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. And the wheels kick, and the wind song, and the white sails shaking, and a gray mist on the sea's face, and a great dawn breaking. I must go down to the sea again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying and the flung spray and the blown spume and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trick's over. Isn't that nice? It's really
Mhm.
cool. I think that's the end of the slides here. So let me just first of all stop the sharing. Unless anyone would like to comment before, before I stop the recording. Would anyone like to comment?
I'd like to say something about the fish and boat picture that you just saw, number 32. It's the previous slide.
This one?
No, the one, next one.
This one?
Yes. No, not this picture, but the one you have your cursor on. Okay, that one. What I wanted to point out is that in the earlier ones, the guys on the boat are throwing Jonah directly into the fish's mouth.
Right.
And this shows a much sweeter picture where even though it's threatening, it's the fish that's the bad guy, not the other men on the boat. So if the other men were from that wicked town, then maybe it does make sense if the other sailors that they're throwing him directly into the mouth. But I assume it's just an artist's perception of how to tell the story most dramatically. But this one's kinder. The fish is going after him, but the men aren't throwing him directly at the fish.
That's interesting. On the other hand, in the story of the actual story in the Tanakh of Jonah, the men on the boat are very God-fearing, right?
Uh-huh.
And they don't want to throw him aboard, but he insists. He says that he's the one who's responsible, and only then do they agree. And they're terrified at what they're doing. And here you could also see, just to substantiate what I just said. You see the oars that are out here. What do you think the oars are for?
Trying to reach out to him in case.
Right, trying to
Yeah.
save the drowning person. So it's a very interesting picture. I mean, it goes counter to it does go counter to the biblical story. It's a fascinating picture. Yes, I agree. And it's completely different than the earlier pictures. Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to stop sharing right now. And I also will, hi, Joyce, you just came in very late. I didn't see you. And let me stop the recording. And